We're here at RH Factor Studios to talk with Art Kurum of Black Powder Media. So let's head on over to the ADR suite. So talk to me about how you got started in the business.
I originally started as believe it or not, as a composer for commercials and documentaries almost 20 years ago. And through one series of mistakes after the other, I ended up in the post-production community in Canada. And after I had actually several years experience working on all kinds of projects, music videos, documentaries, I got into the video games industry by way of being supervising sound guy as well as post-production coordinator for, at the time, a little-known TV show called Electric Playground. A couple of years of doing that and getting involved in the games community got me down to Southern California to work at Laguna Beach on the Matrix video game, which again took up about 3 years of my life. And then since then, it's been one game after the other, one film after the other. My company, Black Powder, does a range of creative media services.
So, you know, you've got experience in sound supervising for feature films as well as video games. Which is more challenging?
I think they're all the same in levels of challenging, because it's really it's based on the amount of passion you put into any project you work on. So you're still going to try to do the best that you can and take a bit out of you and learn something from every project and then take that on. It informs the next project you do and the next group of great talented guys you end up working with. So, you know, it's all the same.
Do you have a steady team of guys that you work with either on staff or freelancers that you keep the same team on each project, or do you like to explore and try to find new guys and different talents as you go from project to project?
I think it's a bit of both. Like if I'm casting for a video game, for example, I do extensive casting for every game I work on. In that case, there are some talent that I will go back to. They're my go-to guys for certain voices or certain characters. In other cases, I really like experimenting and finding out what sparks, because really it's all about finding that character, that part that sparks and then makes a difference. We did that on a game, Condemned, that I worked on. The guy that I picked to do the part of the serial killer was actually a comic and a stand-up guy. But he had this amazing sense of timing, and he could turn it menacing. And he himself didn't believe at the time that he could do it, so we sat down together and we worked the role back and forth, and he came in and he was astounding. He almost approached it like method. He walks into the studio, he didn't talk to anybody that day, he just gets into the part and delivered the lines. And to this day, I still have people telling me that was an amazing role. You know, so it's all down to that spark.
So you do a lot of directing with voiceover artists for the various video games that you work on?
Absolutely.
Would you say that that's more challenging than directing actors for a film?
I think directing actors for a film is challenging in different ways. If you're doing voiceover for a video game, you have a lot of different factors to bear in mind. You're trying to bring life to what is ultimately going to be an animated piece that's playing out in front of the player, especially for cinematics and cutscenes. You're recording all the voices in many cases before the animation is complete. So there's a lot of kind of second guessing and trying to envision the whole piece in your head. And that's kind of where I take my inspiration from if I'm directing any parts for games. But in films, it's completely different because you're on the spot. It's being cut at that time. You know, it's being filmed at that time.
Unique challenges on either side, I guess, right?
Yes, absolutely.
What's the most fun you've ever had on a project?
Every project.
Every project has its...
That's a guarantee. Like, I don't take on a project unless it's going to be fun. I refuse to do that. And touch wood, I've been lucky enough so far that I've been able to get away with it. You know, there are some projects that are not fun, but they are still fun because the passion and the pain all adds up to something, and you learn from it.
What do you think has been the most challenging project you've ever worked on?
The one I worked on with you. I'm kidding.
Hey, was it the sound design?
There's nothing really that stands out. And I wouldn't want to put any of them down in any way because I've given my best to every project. And I actually look for the hard in every project. Because it's unless you walk on that narrow path and go to the place that you love, you're not going to be able to make a difference. That's the way I look at it. You know, I'm not into this assembly line, get as many projects churned out as possible. It's all about adding to who I am and adding to the wealth of creative media that there is out there.
So I'm sensing that a secret to your success might be passion versus technical experience. You seem that every approach that you take is driven by your heart versus the tools that you're using. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think so. I think, and also not to forget that tools are something that we learn. You know, humans have been learning to use tools since they were humans. So I have no problem with learning how to use a tool, or relearning how to use a tool, or learning how to use a tool in a different way. To me, that's actually part of the excitement. You know, you can take a microphone, for example, that's being used on post-production and throw it into a singing scenario, and it might just work. You know, our whole industry is full of stories where some slightly poorly wired microphone or a tube amp that wasn't working right gave rise to a totally new sound. And we should be out there experimenting and looking for those things. Because in those little spots you find the heart of it all. That's the way I look at it.
Is there any happy accident that you've came across that you remember more than the other? Something that really kind of sparked your interest and developed into something very cool?
It's always full of some kind of happy accident. You know, when you're working many hours and you're beginning to lose control of your reality and rationality, and sometimes something creative comes out of that space. Those are, I think, the happiest of accidents, because it's almost like you let some bigger power take over and you're channeling it. You know, it's that moment where something better than you or something greater than you has spoken through you. It's our spiritual moment for guys who are in sound and music and that kind of thing, isn't it?
Do you have any advice for somebody that might be starting out in the business?
Don't do it unless you love it. And if you love it, find the part of it that you love the most and just keep doing it and get better and better and better at that thing that you do. And don't lose faith, because at some point someone's going to recognize that you have this ability. I think that to me is very, very important. Because if you don't have passion for it, you should forget about it.
Do you have any advice for independent filmmakers who are kind of posting their own project? They don't have much sound experience. Is there any top tips that you would give them as to how to approach their project?
I think at the very least, they need to, very early on in their production cycle, get the advice of a qualified sound person. Even if they're trying to save money, that qualified sound person is going to help them to make the right choices. Because you can't go back, in many cases, and reshoot for sound. You can do things like ADR and throw ambiences in and recreate to some extent. And there are some films that get by completely on recreated sound or looped sound. But there are still a ton of amazing practical tips and suggestions that any qualified audio guy can provide that'll make the experience so much easier, especially first-time, second-time filmmakers.
So what do you think the future of sound design holds?
Just like in any creative field, you're seeing the tools for making and for creating things coming down to the very individualistic level. I'm seeing that people are now creators rather than consumers necessarily, or we're constantly doing a bit of both. You know, thanks to the internet, thanks to the way technology has come down to the individual level. We have tools like GarageBand. You have microphones that you can plug into your USB and create any kind of sound that you want or communicate with people with. So I think more than ever, you know, sound also has this really amazing quality that you can convey a lot of information, a lot of connotative, a lot of emotional information with sound. People are social beings. They need to hear each other's voices. There's massive potential in various fields relating to communicating and translating voices, for example. I see things going in the way of it all becoming a more global and more connected world, and that sound is going to play a huge part in helping all that come together.
Now, I've heard a rumor that Foley pits, because they're isolated from the earth, are the actual safest places you could be in California during an earthquake. So as soon as an earthquake, everybody jumps on the center pit and just kind of holds it out, you know.